Welcome to the Oregon Conversation on Board Diversity. I'm Marty Sathoff, co-chair of the 2020 Women on Board Oregon campaign and Senior Vice President and General Counsel of Northwest Natural. I'm here with our campaign chair, Robin Tompkins, and we are honored that you have joined us for this very important conversation today.
Before we get started, I would like to invite everybody to sit back in your chair, take a deep breath, and relax. Although this has been a very challenging year on so many fronts, for the next 2 hours, you'll have the opportunity to focus on a topic that I think we can all agree is very important. Not only important, but maybe imperative at this time: women's leadership in a time of crisis.
When we first started reaching out to find corporate sponsors for this event, it was clearly a time of crisis. Here in Oregon, we've experienced a pandemic, racial protests and unrest, power outages, and raging wildfires. Suffice it to say, there were many reasons why a company may have taken a pass on our ask, but these companies stepped up even with these challenges. So it's with a heartfelt thanks we recognize our bronze level sponsors: Tillamook County Creamery Association, Wells Fargo, Stoll Reeves Law Firm, Portland General Electric, Umpqua Bank, and the Greenbrier Companies.
And our silver level sponsors: Cambia Health Solutions, K&L Gates Law Firm, and a special thanks to my co-chair, Marty, and her company for being the first to jump at the opportunity to support this cause, Northwest Natural. In addition, I'd like to personally thank those female-owned restaurants who agreed to offer you the option of boxed lunches today. In Portland, those would be Elephant's Delicatessen and Grand Central Bakery, Medford, Downtown Market. In Ashland, Louis, Camas, Washington, Nuestra Mesa. In Bend, the Lemon Tree. In Salem, Wild Pear, and in Lake Oswego's Checky's Pie. We all know that the restaurant sector has been badly hit during this pandemic. And if you can remember to patronize one of those local establishments, either today or in the future, it would be our way of saying thanks for their willingness to support us and champion our cause.
This afternoon, you'll get to hear from our distinguished VIP panel as they speak to this uniquely relevant topic. But before we turn it over to our wonderful moderator and panel, I'd like to briefly go over a few housekeeping matters. During the VIP panel, the sound and video will be turned off, but you will be able to access the chat function at the bottom of your screen to ask questions. The questions will be gathered up and directed to our moderator. Time permitting, a few of the questions will be posed to our panel. Once the VIP panel is concluded, you need to return to the calendar and click on the second Zoom link you received, which will take you directly to your breakout session. Keep in mind, this is our first Women on Board virtual event, so fingers crossed you will arrive seamlessly at your appointed room without a hitch. However, if for some reason you're routed to the wrong breakout room or you encounter any other technical issue, there is a Help Center link included in the chat at the bottom of your screen and in your calendar invite. A team of people are standing by to quickly get you to where you need to be. If nothing else, we've learned to be a little patient this year with technology. So I hope you will bring those skills to the table if needed.
Without further ado, I'd like to introduce you to today's moderator for our next segment. For those of you who haven't met her, she's a force of nature. Ms. Katie Kelly is Senior Vice President of Talent Development at Lee Hecht Harrison, a division of the Adecco Group, the world's leading HR solutions partner. In her position, she is charged with establishing talent development strategy, driving sales, and managing Lee Hecht Harrison's coaching and consulting regional practice in the Western United States. Katie brought 2020 Women on Boards to Oregon last year for its inaugural year, and it was a resounding success. She set the bar very high, and we can only hope to match her efforts. So sit back and relax. We are all in her capable hands. So Katie, take it away.
Good morning, esteemed guests. It is my great honor to spend the next 50 minutes moderating our keynote panel on the topic, Women Directors During Times of Crisis. As Robin and Marty Lynn commented, this has been a particularly unique year around the globe and here in Oregon. And there is no one better to address not only the climate in today's boardroom, and how, as Ruth Bader Ginsburg advocated, more women can be in places where decisions are being made. Welcome, panelists. Kelly Williams is founding chair and co-CEO of the Private Equity Women Investor Network. She serves on Oregon's The Greenbrier Companies Board as chair of the Nominating and Governance Committee, member of the Audit Committee, Nominating and Governance and Compensation Committee. Ms. Williams also serves on the Grasshopper Bank Board and as CEO of the Williams Legacy Foundation, a trustee of New York School of Interior Design, a board trustee for the Nantucket Historical Association, vice chair of the Board of Commissioners for the Smithsonian American Art Museum, and a trustee of the National Philanthropic Trust. Welcome, Kelly.
Thanks, Katie.
Beta Manager, President and CEO of Manager Global Consulting Group. Beta serves as the chair of Governance and Nominating Committee on the board of Valvoline and on the board of Helios Education Foundation. Beta was a member of the corporate leadership team at Nike, sparking his love and affiliation with the Oregon community, as well as serving on several Nike M&A transaction teams. Mr. Manager served in similar roles at Levi Strauss & Company and was also an investment banker. He recently served as chairman of West Point's Civilian Public Affairs Committee. Welcome, Beta. Kathy Stauffer is an independent director serving on the boards of Oregon's FLIR Systems as a member of the Compensation Committee and the Nominating and Governance Committee, as well as on the boards of BevMo and the Swig Company. Kathy is an experienced public and private company board chair, private equity board chair, and advisor across a variety of industries, including industrial technology, consumer, retail, CPG, and real estate. Kathy is highly attuned to board effectiveness, diversity, CEO development, and succession planning, and is a member of the Consumer Technology Association Board of Industry Leaders and an NACD Board Leadership Fellow. Welcome, Kathy.
Thanks, Katie.
All right. And Andrea Clack Rogers Varnado is Vice President and General Manager of Strategy at Macy's and serves on Oregon's Umpqua Bank Board on their finance and compensation committees, making her the youngest executive to serve on a U.S. public board, as well as board advisor at Diligent Institute. Previously, Andrea held roles at Williams-Sonoma, where she led the company's acquisition of Outward Inc., an innovative 3D imaging company at the intersection of retail and technology, executing on the company's vision to shape the future of home shopping. Welcome, speakers. Hello, hello, hello. Good morning. Andrea, loved hearing you on the San Francisco 2020 campaign yesterday. We're going to turn it over to you to open the conversation at the very beginning. If you could just tell us a little bit about your experience coming onto your first board, please.
Happily, and I will actually share one of those unique or aha moments because I know we're going to hear a lot of stories today. During my first board meeting, I remember sitting in an audit committee meeting and we were going through the depth of the information for our bank. And one of the other board members turns to me and says, Andrea, what do you think? My very first audit committee meeting. And this was not to put me on the spot, but it really did highlight this aha moment that once you're on the board, everyone really has an equal voice. So whether you're a supply chain expert or whatever it is, you can have a voice on audit, on finance, on marketing. And there's no 101 beginners to this. Your onboarding is really up to you and in partnership. But when you join that board, you are joining in right there in the depth and flow of that meeting.
Incredible. And how did that impact you? I mean, did you start feeling like you needed to start doing research across other sectors, or did you acclimate pretty quickly and just you rest on, your expertise as it was?
I acclimated pretty quickly. I think most of us, no matter what meeting we're in and no matter what our expertise, we usually have an opinion. Some of it's warranted, some of it's not. And so it was such a welcome environment to even start putting out your thoughts and being able to stretch the conversation while also acknowledging the unique perspective or background that I bring coming from a retailer or consumer brand and how that might fit into this conversation.
I love that. That really helps open up this conversation and that it is just a totally new landscape. And one of the attractive, opportunities is getting out of our own subject matter expertise and being able to really establish more of our breadth at the executive level. So thank you. We'll toss it over to Veda to tell us about his first board experience.
Well, great, Katie. Thanks for that great introduction and really appreciate being here today. I want to first start before I get to the board experience by saying really my participation today really can be summed up in 3 words. First is gratitude for all the people that really assisted me along the way from college to help me navigate the boardroom. And secondly, allyship. I think it's important if 2020's taught us anything, whether you're talking about social justice or whether you're talking about gender diversity in boards, allyship is important, and that's why I'm here today to really demonstrate and share what I've learned. And then thirdly, reciprocity. It would be really selfish of me to hoard all that I've learned over the years in the boardroom and not share it with all of you. And on these sessions, it's great to see the comments from my friends in Phoenix issuing the Sun Devil comments from my alma mater. I guess they see this funky in the background, so it's great to see. But it really then kind of speaks to one of my great favorite social media memes right now and trends, and many of you have seen it on social media as well, is how it started and how it's going. I'm sure many of you have seen that. So I took the initiative today to really kind of show you, if you could see, this was my very first board at age 20.
Wow.
I was appointed to the board of the Arizona Board of Regents, making multi-billion-dollar decisions with CEOs, the owner of the Phoenix Suns, and others out there. And very much like Andrea's story, asked for my opinion and had to be ready to do that. And was really happy to be there, but really did participate fully. And so that led me now some 4 decades later to how it's going. This is my board experience at Valvoline at Ashland, where we're protecting shareholder value and creating value for the shareholders. So I thought that would be inspirational for those people today who are in the audience that are wondering if I'm ready. And given all the academic credentials you have, the financial expertise that you've accumulated, you are far more ready today in your experiences now than I was at age 20 to enter that boardroom. But what it says, and if you remember nothing else I say today, just remember the fact that you're prepared, you're ready, and our job today really is to kind of help you navigate that journey and to really give you the skills and maybe even that first introduction. I'm proud that a couple of the coaches today are people that I've helped get on their very first boards. So I'm really looking forward to the conversation, and thanks for having me.
Oh, Veda, we love your energy. Thank you so much for joining us. Kathy, what about you? What was your first board experience like?
Well, thanks, Katie and Veda. That was great. The only downside of doing this virtually is we haven't gotten to meet as speakers. And I love this group that you've put together. And I hope we do get to spend time together in person someday. So for me, actually, my first public corporate board was as an executive. So I was president of the company. So I'll put that one aside. And the first time that I joined an outside board as an independent director, I think the thing that really struck me was needing to find that sweet spot of belonging, but also still bringing what you were brought to bring, which was a different voice. Because we all want to feel like we belong, right? But on the other hand, we don't, and especially on a board, and especially now, and as we talk about diversity, it's so important to bring your own point of view and not have everybody agreeing. But that can be really uncomfortable sometimes. I mean, the first time I walked into that board meeting, I felt like, wow, I do not belong here. I don't look the same. We're not at the same life cycle. We maybe don't even value the same things. But once we got to know each other, you do realize that you, on a personal level, we do have much more in common in what we value. But the way that we think is very different. And so you really have to navigate finding the sweet spot between assimilating and also keeping your unique voice, or you're not bringing the value to the board that you were really originally brought in to do.
That's incredible insight. I love that. And I think about that environmental mindfulness. It's a kind of a competency that we work on with leaders on, is about reading the room. And of course, ever more difficult in this virtual world, but balancing the authenticity of, your point of view, while also, acclimating to the climate. So thank you so much. Great opening, Kathy. And Kelly, what about you? What was your first board seat like?
So I'm excited to be with everyone. Not to rub it in, but I'm joining you from Palm Beach, Florida. It's pretty gorgeous here. I do miss Portland, but I won't be there for a while. I'm appearing to you today in front of this incredible painting by an abstract expressionist artist named Corinne West. But during her lifetime, during her career, she used the name Michael Corinne West, because her mentor, Arshile Gorky, told her that she'd never be taken seriously if she had a woman's name. So she used Michael so that people would actually come and see her work. And so I love it because I think she's extraordinary, but I also appear before it because women don't have to act like men anymore. We can act like ourselves. We can stand out and be women and sort of take our own place. My story actually comes a little bit earlier than the others you've had, in terms of how did I get on a board, because it's actually pretty unique. I was on the board, as you heard in my bio, of the Nantucket Historical Association, and it is exactly what you think it is. It's this darling, sweet little nonprofit that cherishes the history of this really unique island, which is, a resort community. And I happened to be sitting next to another woman who was a businesswoman. And what many of us find is that a lot of women who serve on nonprofit boards are often the wives of rich men. And there is nothing wrong with that. They have extraordinary skills. They make great contributions. But if you're a businesswoman on these boards, you kind of stand out and you tend to find each other. And so this other woman and I found each other, and she happened to be an executive with the Greenbrier companies. And she asked me if I had ever thought about being on a public company board. And I said, well, in fact, I had just sold my company. My career's been in private equity. I built a $30 billion asset management firm, which I sold in 2014. And so, so that's how I ended up going on to a board. And so I always tell people, be very aware of your surroundings. If you're a woman or you're a person of color, you want to go on a board, it's not necessarily a linear path to get there. And it's important, if there is a company you're interested in, look at the nonprofits in your community or in the community and see who sits on those boards. Because if they're important people in the corporate world, they're probably also philanthropic and they're giving back in some way. And you may have the opportunity to meet them and kind of show your stuff if you encounter them in a nonprofit way. The only other thing I'll share is once I was invited to join the board, I shared the good news with my fellow members of my YPO forum, for those of you who know Young Presidents Organization. And to a man, all the men in my forum said, why would you want to do that? And it was very interesting that the male perspective was, gee, I never want to be on a public company board. There's too much, liability. And every woman I said said, oh my God, that's extraordinary. You're so lucky. How do I do that? So it's also a very different perspective on the desirability of serving on a public company board.
Excellent. Thank you. So helpful. One of the themes that's really come up in the Women on Boards conversation also has been, it's not a pipeline problem, getting more diverse faces into the boardroom. It's a network problem. And so I love that in one of our prep calls with these 4 incredible speakers, you're going to hear the theme of really encouraging you to consider your visibility in your professional network. And how you can move through the networks of boards from a nonprofit to private to public, if such is your desire. So wonderful, wonderful, wonderful beginning. Shifting now to the second question. Now that you're on a public board and looking back out, what are the unique challenges that you think women of color face today as far as their ascension to a public board? Andrea, do you want to take that first?
Sure, I'd be happy to. I think we can all agree there's a great amount of attention on this topic right now, but it's only made it slightly easier if you think about the amount of attention and how we're going about. And so many of the challenges come to do because it's not a linear process. It's not, hey, we're going to send out this board spec, it's open to everyone to apply, and you go through this typical process. It is still very much about network mapping, not just the current board directors, but even the recruiting firms or the search firms, or even some of the programs that you're in and how they narrow down. Another challenge that I find, especially for women becoming on boards, is the board spec. So there's usually an ideal profile. And then just like in your regular job, there's not necessarily you have to have every single tick mark, but this is what it looks like. But one of those challenges that I think we all have to do is really thread the needle from our experience to that profile and how it's relevant. So I'll use the example. I was speaking to someone yesterday who said, hey, I'm a lawyer. I've been told they usually don't like lawyers on boards. And that's not true. However, if you think about your experience, if you happen to be a lawyer, have you worked on acquisitions and deals? And is this company highly acquisitive? And so it's about tying together those very specific experiences you have had to the story and the goal and where the company is going. And I think those are just a couple of the challenges. And then I'll just close by saying, once you're on the board, we're talking about getting women on boards, but it's not just getting one, because the studies have shown it's when you have 3 or 4 that the perspective really starts to shift. We would never look at a man or any other considered gender and say, hey, you speak for all of the men as the one man in this room. And unfortunately, when you are the only, the youngest, the this or that, that tends to be the token area that we go for. And so it's important not just to get one, but to get a few so we can see a broader breadth of the perspectives that are inherent within this gender.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Beta, any thoughts on the unique challenges for women of color in entering the boardroom?
Yeah, no, I appreciate the question. And certainly it is a topic of great discussion. I think many of us who serve, particularly in the governance and nominating capacity on boards, received a letter from one of the major shareholders at BlackRock, the president, Larry Fink, who really began from a shareholder perspective, talked about, hey, we want to see before we make an investment in your firm or in your company that you have a board that represents our values of diversity. So we want to see more women. We want to see people of color. And before we make an investment, because that shows that you're thinking about the future board refreshment, getting rid of the male, pale, and stale ethos that so often prevails in the boardroom. So I think what Andrea said is important, and what you said earlier, it's not a question of talent, it's a question of networking in many instances and doing that mapping, which I think is important. One of the things I often do when I speak to classrooms out there is, and not only on this topic, but others about starting careers, is I'll hold up my iPhone oftentimes and make the class guess how many people I have in that iPhone. And I'll get a guess of 500, 1,000. There are actually 9,500 people in that iPhone. And I say that to say that not everyone gets a holiday card every year, but it's about the connectivity and the different experiences I've had with those people over a wide horizon that's helped me kind of stay in the game of really understanding what value what they're trying to achieve, where they're trying to go, how I connect people that they're looking for boards or for even C-suite positions. And I think that's important. And I know we're going to talk later about competencies, but I'll just make the point here now and let someone else talk. The other piece here is that boards are moving away from actually looking at specialized roles for boards, specialized IT positions. They're looking for more people that have broader experiences. And so I think that plays to women's advantage right now because you do have a wide variety of experiences.
Kathy, do you want to build on that? Or Kelly, either?
Absolutely. So yeah, I mean, network is number one, and there's so many different networks I think that we have that we don't always think of when you think about board roles. I know when I've been chairman of two different private equity boards, but we ran them as public governance because the exit could be an IPO. And in those cases, when I was looking to refresh the boards, I was really looking for people that not necessarily that I knew, but that other people knew that would work out well, because especially in private equity, you have a limited period of time. to have a good exit, and you really want to stack the odds in your favor, that you're going to have a highly functional board. You only come together physically maybe 4 times a year, yet you're expected to be highly functioning all the time. So I would reach out to our auditing firm for referrals that they might have, in addition to my normal network, and a variety of professional providers. So I would just say, let it be known to as many people if you're interested in board roles, but also ask them for feedback if they think that you, if you think you're well suited to it. Because I've heard a lot of men refer to women that would be great on a board, but they probably wouldn't be interested. Why they think that, I do not know. Maybe just because they haven't been that common in the past. Unfortunately, that's changed a lot. So I think it's important to let it be known. Take people and make them your advocate by asking them, do you think that I would do well on a board? Are there things that you think that I could develop? Because if they already know you, they're going to be a much better person to recommend you and give you fair feedback. And the last thing that I would say is just make sure that you define why you want to be on a board and what you want to get out of it. If you're still a full-time professional, you probably only have time for one full-time board role, especially for a public company. So it's really important that you choose wisely and you're clear-minded about it. It's exciting to get your first board role, but don't just take any board role, because it's not that easy to come off a board gracefully. And you could be in it for many, many, many years, and you could go through a lot of crises together. And you need to know that you don't have to be best friends with the other board members, but you need to be able to inherently trust them, especially if hard times hit. So choose wisely. Don't just say yes because it's flattering. And network. The network is probably the most important thing for getting that exposure that you need.
Such great advice. Thank you so much, Kathy. Kelly, anything to build on from that one?
I guess a couple points I would make is sort of the reverse engineering of the network issue is keep in mind that, at least in my experience, the boards I've been on, which are largely populated by white men, it's not that they don't want women or people of color on the board. It's that they don't know them, or, there just aren't that many of them in their network. And in my experience, they're very welcoming and willing to have people join. And so back to my original point, you kind of have to figure out how to put yourself in their way. And I often tell the story of, how many times I'll go to a gala or a party and I'll be, seated next to some, ostensible mogul, and he'll look at me and say, oh, she's somebody's wife. And I'll start talking to them about what I do. And suddenly their eyes light up and they're like, oh my gosh, I'm on this board and we're looking to recruit more women. And so, don't hide your light under a bushel. Make sure people know who you are and put yourself in the way. The other thing that's really important to know is only 30% of boards actually use headhunters to look for new board members. The vast majority of board members are recruited through the networks of the board. And so again, it's really important to make sure if there's a board that you know of, that it fits your skill set, that fits your passion, that's in your area, find a way to network yourself to the board and multiple board members. And the way these things happen is that, it's often the case that there are 2 or 3 slots on the board that are coming up in 12, 24 months time. So that there's a timeline to get it done, and you really have to start letting people get to know you and understand that there's some dynamics going on in the board. So do the homework to understand, to look at the board. I mean, if you look at a board and you see, okay, it's a board of 10 people and half of them are age 70 or older, it's very likely there's going to be some turnover there. So there may be some opportunities, and maybe it's a good time for me to spend my time and invest my time getting to know folks, get to know the CEO, get to know the CFO, get to know the general counsel. There are people you can get to know who also can be your advocate, even though they may not be putting your name forward. They will be asked what they think about you, and it's not a bad thing for them to have a good opinion of you.
Excellent.
Hey,
So
if I could follow up on that. I think Kelly makes a great point here. Actually, my first board came through a deal that didn't happen at Nike. It was the owner of the Harlem Globetrotters. He was turning 72, about to leave a board. He wanted to do a deal with Converse, which we had acquired. The deal didn't happen because it wasn't good for Converse and Nike. Wasn't necessarily, the economics didn't work for Harlem Globetrotters. But he watched the people that I brought into the room. He watched the way the meeting was conducted. I had no prior relationship with him. Little did I know, he went back to his board that he was leaving, recommended me for the board. A month later, I get this call, and then I'm being interviewed and set for the board. So sometimes boards can happen even from a failed business deal, but you never know who's watching. So I think Kelly's point is spot on.
I love that. I love that. And overall, my takeaway is disrupt our networks, really challenge ourselves to disrupt some of the norms in our network. So let's move on to kind of the core theme of this year's campaign, which is around board leadership in crisis, obviously feminine leadership. Would love to know what your leadership lessons have been throughout the many crises of 2020. Kathy, do you want to take this one to begin?
Sure. Well, there have definitely been a lot of lessons if we've been paying attention in 2020. And I think we need to take those as gifts. As I keep telling people, I think we're supposed to learn something from this year, and it's not over yet because we haven't learned everything that we're supposed to learn. So I think personally, it's, focusing on what you can do and not on what you can't do. There's lots of things we can't do, but there's lots of things we can do. And as a leader and as a board member, one of the things that I found that doesn't take much, but has such an outsized impact is just going out of your way to recognize people within your companies, say a few kind words, send them a note, listen, give them a safe space to, share the things that they're concerned with. It can go such a long way in making them feel both better about the day, but also about the future. And that's a good thing to do at any time, right? But now more than ever, it's just, it strikes me how just a few kind words people can just completely perk up. But in a more business standpoint, so FLIR, I'm so proud of FLIR. So they create a variety of products that's used in military and defense and industrial cases. And when the wildfires hit in Oregon, it became very personal because a lot of our employees lost their homes or were displaced, but our equipment is used by firefighters to help see through smoke, to help find people and search and rescue and really in life-saving situations. And they quickly deployed more equipment out to the firefighting departments and also opened up our facilities to the employees that were displaced because we had showers, we had clean, safe spaces and parking lots where they could sort of temporarily use as a home base while their homes were disrupted. And I'm sure a lot of people in the audience today were going through similar things. And so again, FLIR just focused on the things that they could do to really help make a difference. And then with COVID, a lot of our technology is used for early screening for elevated skin temperature, which is one of the first signs, and making that product available to professionals all over to help get businesses back to work, but with a degree of safety, is something that the company was able to really rally around and be very proud of. And I think this year, especially, you really need to focus again on what you can do and what you can, what your purpose is, both as an individual and as a corporation, and draw on that and use it for good.
Beautifully said, Kathy. Thank you. Veda, what about you, my friend? Anything you've learned from a leadership perspective in the boardroom and kind of managing through all these layers of crises in 2020?
Well, I think this, again, thank you, Katie, speaks to having a wide diversity of experience. As you mentioned in the introduction, I've been an investment banker. I've done communications. I've been in public service. I've done an M&A. So that actually makes me a fairly both valuable board member, but also unconventional in that I've played in a lot of different arenas. But I would say whether you're talking about crisis times or whether you even talk about regular times, the ability to be adaptive and to be nimble, I think, is extremely important, and how you can help a company, whether you're in the C-suite or on the board, figure out what is that special sauce that you can bring, particularly in the midst of a crisis. I think it's uniquely important. So Valvoline, I'll use it as an example, is that when obviously no one wanted to touch anything during the pandemic, and we're still kind of in that zone, we do oil changes at Valvoline Instant Oil Changes. Some of you in Portland know Oil Can Henry's, which we acquired and turned them into Valvolines. But one of the secret sauces that we figured out and began to market and heavily advertise around was the fact that you don't have to touch anyone. You don't have to get out of your car. You can come through the oil change bay, get your oil changed, and not have to encounter a person. And we can do even the payments can be done touchless. So helping your company and your board kind of figure out, and your company figure out what that special sauce is and what that ingredient is, I think is important. As my colleagues who are on this call from Nike know, Kelly Leonard and Pamela Nefer-Karaz, and I built a career on crisis, doing zigging when others were zagging. And this actually played very well for me, because sometimes you have to take those assignments in which sometimes no one else wants to take, but there's high reward in taking those assignments. And if you don't succeed, people maybe not have expected you to succeed anyway. So the risk is lower. So always look for those ways to be a problem solver. And I think that's one of the great examples out of this crisis, is that, be a problem solver, which I think put me in front of Phil Knight, the founder and CEO, probably more so if I were in a conventional role.
So beautifully said. Thank you so much. Kelly, what about you?
So to me, I think, all of the things we've encountered this year really, as a board member, gives you a chance to test the values of the company. Every company has a mission statement, the motherhood and apple pie, we want to be great. And this is really the time to say, okay, is this a company that lives its values? Because then you as a director can make the decision, is this a company I want to be affiliated with? And so for Greenbrier, our first, second, and third value is respect for people. And that value runs through every single one of the crises that we've encountered this year. Because if you don't have that as a company, you're going to fail. You're not going to get it right every time, but you're going to fail. And so to me, obviously the opportunity for a board to respond to every one of these crises is incredibly important, whether it's the pandemic. I mean, it's heartbreaking to hear about employees at your company succumbing to this disease. Social justice. I mean, there's no company that isn't touched by that. And to me, we're a 125-year-old manufacturing company, and we exist throughout the world. And so, diversity means something different everywhere where we are. But the opportunity as a board to step up and set the tone is incredibly important. And so, I'm involved in a lot of diversity initiatives. This is part of what I spent my career on Wall Street doing. And a lot of companies are using the acronym IDEA, inclusion, diversity, equity, access. And at Greenbrier, I encouraged our team, led by Jack Isselman, who's on this call, to add an L. So we call it IDEAL, and the L stands for leadership. And it's not about necessarily just getting people of color and women into leadership. It's the leadership of the company, including the board, taking responsibility to make sure this gets implemented. It's having the measurements, it's having the accountability because if it doesn't happen, if we don't hold people accountable, what gets measured gets done. If we don't hold them accountable, it doesn't happen. And so to me, this is a place where the board can be incredibly impactful. And to Veda's point, bring our experience from all the variety of industries that boards typically come from to really bring best practices and bring those measures of accountability to bear. So for me, that's been the biggest leadership lesson.
Absolutely incredible. Thank you so much. Andrea, take us home with this one, my friend.
I will fill together this circle. Kathy started us talking about how this really changes our perspective and what this means. And I've said this before, but I will say it again here. If you think about these perspectives, I'll use examples that I think all of us can relate to. Some of you might not have known before this year started or even believed that your team could work remotely full-time. That was a surprise. Some people might not have understood before this year what Black Lives Matter meant. Some people might have been surprised by the current election climate that there currently is. But I can assure you that there are people on your teams and in your organizations that have been knowing this for a while because they've been feeling the impact of it. And the great thing about this year is we've been having more authentic discussions through all levels of the organizations and even in the boardrooms having these discussions. And it's not just a social issue or any other feeling you might attest to it. But when you have this reflection of perspectives, that can lead to new products and new services for customers you didn't even know you had or what they were missing. When you are thinking about your employees and the issues that they're facing at home, they might be loyal and that might turn into employee retention. So this changing in perspectives, I think, really gives us a great opportunity to rethink some business issues. And those perspectives will help us continue to grow, hopefully, as we come out of this.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. So much. Listen, we're coming up on our last 12 minutes, so I'm going to teeter us into the final question, and then maybe some questions from the panel. So we would love to hear, and Veda touched on this, we're seeing a trend of boards broadening the traditional categories of experience and looking for candidates with depth and breadth across other areas. A recent example of Valerie Jarrett joining Ralph Lauren's board. So would just love to talk about kind of the competencies and the unique new kind of frame of mind that is taking place. Andrea, maybe you can pick it up first. Thank you.
Sure. So thinking about all the things that are changing this year as we think about work from home, health and wellness, all of these things, I do think one of the trends will be an increased focus on workforce management, community, and diversity. So there might be more opportunities for those who are in human relations or other workforce development fields. And another area, because this is a question we get a lot, is like, oh, I'm not a CEO or a CFO, or I'm a VP, or whatever your title is. I think that there's going to be more opportunity for those who have specific functional experiences and how they apply to the broader organization.
Beautiful. Thank you. Does anyone want to speak to that as well?
Yeah, I agree with that. I think, and I mentioned earlier that again, I think skills are broadening. So I did take a look before we had the call at the PricewaterhouseCoopers PwC Annual Director Survey. And any one of you that are participants can go to PwC site and see what directors are actually saying about these topics. And so I pulled a couple of stats, is that financial, operational, risk management are still highly coveted skills in the boardroom. I would add M&A to that for the reasons that other panelists have talked about as well, in terms of understanding the economics and metrics around mergers and acquisitions. But from the last time they did the survey last year, specific industry expertise was down, IT digital was down 14%, industry expertise was down 27%, international experience was down 23%, and marketing was down 18%. So it shows you that boards are really not just trying to get CEOs anymore, that they are valuing other and wider and different kind of experiences, and how you can fit your experiences into those particular metrics can be helpful toward the next board seat.
Yeah, and I'll just add on to that, with the focus on ESG, so environmental, social, and governance matters, I think that really does broaden the scope, because the board's role isn't to duplicate management or one-up management in their skill set. And there's going to be certain things you always need. You need the financial expert. You need, I think that you should have a strong legal expert, and depending on the business, maybe compliance. But there are other what are considered traditionally softer skills like culture and ESG and CEO development that have become critically important, because people now understand the downstream implications and how they can add value or take away value, and the risk that's involved. So I think that opens it up much more broadly, reinforcing both what Veda and Andrea said. Anything that you can fill in blind spots. I mean, I think that's what the board is always trying to avoid, right? Is having blind spots. And so I think for people that are considering board roles, think about your unique superpowers, and not just functional, again, because you're not going to be running the company, but it's oversight. So what are the things that you tend to see that other people don't always see? And at this point in your career and your lives, you probably know pretty well what those are, and make sure that you're clear about those, and that you put that forward, because again, what's considered soft in the past is becoming hard and really important.
Okay, perfect. Kelly, did that cover it for you too?
The only other thing that I would add is that despite the statistic that Veda mentioned, I think all companies are global now, and the pandemic has accelerated that. And so certainly what I'm seeing on the boards where I sit is people with international experience and particular government experience, which normally, Valerie Jarrett is a great example of somebody whose skills are transferable, in part because you understand how to surf the bureaucracy, and that is no small feat, whether you're in the United States or anywhere else. And so every company needs help in connecting those dots and figuring out how to get business done around the world. And so people who bring those skills and those experience, again, you may not be a CEO per se, but you may have had tremendous experience in government, and that's a really helpful skill for a board.
Excellent. Thank you so much. So we have time for one question from our amazing attendees. The question that was most repeated was around any advice for how a Black woman can best navigate the boardroom, any unique counsel or networking suggestions for our Black female attendees.
Yeah, well, I think I mentioned earlier, again, there are some very specific board recruiters that specialize in diverse recruitment. There's a firm called Diversified, I believe out of Philadelphia. It's run by some former executives from Heidrick and Struggles, which is one of the major firms out there. And they split off and really do specialize in that. In fact, Russell Reynolds Associates, someone that I used, and one of the things I really intentionally did, and I think other panelists can associate with this, I intentionally decided to gain control of the governance and nominating committee. That way I could really control what kind of diverse slate would go before the board in terms of board directors and even impact the C-suite. So that was a very intentional strategy on my part to be sure that we would never have a board that would go undiverse. And I see Alice Tang asked a question about Asian directors as well on a couple of occasions. So again, according to Russell Reynolds, a study that they did, about 3.7% of 209 specifically of the Fortune 500 total board seats are Asian American. So to address that, but African Americans, there are some specific resources. The head of the board practice for Russell Reynolds is an African American. So there are some networking and relationships that can be built that would be helpful.
Thank you so much. Anybody else with any other unique networking or counsel?
Well,
go ahead.
I'm sorry. So like Veda, I chair the nominating and governance committee for a number of boards. And actually when I joined Greenbrier, the first two of the first board members who were recruited were women, both women of color, one Black, one Asian. And one of those women, Wanda Felton, is now a special advisor to Spencer Stewart's board practice. So I would say, get to know Wanda Felton. She is an advocate. She's a believer. But again, this is where you really need to do your homework. I think everybody on this panel has said that. Get to know who the NomGov chairs are on the boards that you're interested in. Find a way to network to them, find a way for them to get to know you. I can tell you all eyes are upon them, all eyes are upon the boards. This is something that we talk about all of the time. I can't tell you how many calls I get from women of color who are my friends who want to get on boards, and how many times I hear from boards, gosh, can you help us? So, and it may very well be, it is often the case that the board you think you want to be on is not the right one, but someone can help you make a recommendation for you to another opportunity. So again, don't be shy about letting people know that you have interest.
Thank you so much. And Kathy?
Yeah, what Kelly said is exactly right. I was just going to say, for words of encouragement, you are wanted and you are valued. And I think the challenge is just letting it be known that you exist and that you are available. And so it goes, and that you're interested in board work. So it goes back to that networking point, because there is an intense focus on adding more diversity to boards. Absolutely. So I don't think it's a lack of desire, but as we've said many times, it's just the lack of the network. So we all have to work on that. But I think that knowing that there is a place for you out there is an important takeaway.
And I'll quickly add, you might have noticed I paused because I wanted to hear the thoughts of everyone on the panel as
So
well.
glad you did.
But you are absolutely welcomed and wanted. And I think that no matter what cut of diversity, gender, wherever you sit, we have unique challenges. And so what I am encouraging us all to do is to lean into those where they are relevant and don't shy away from talking about them. But also to just focus on that experience that you have, because your experience is just as capable and that expertise is wanted as well.
Yeah, Katie, we would be remiss if we didn't also mention National Association of Corporate Directors. They have both the national session as well as the local session. That's a great resource. I personally taken, again, one of your director coaches, Dave Pam Neferkara, around and introduced her to individuals at that session. Happy to do that. They also have a resume database as well, that which you could put as a prospective director in that database. So that's actually a great place just to catch people even at the bar after sessions and hours, to get to know them and ask them their path to boardrooms, because there's always time after sessions, and there's plenty of social time that they build in for that very purpose.
Thank you so much. And I believe Pamela just won a new board seat.
Yes, she did.
Congratulations, Pamela. We're so proud of you. So proud. So unfortunately, we've run out of time. I can't begin to thank you, incredible luminary leaders, for joining us from Arizona, Palm Beach, San Francisco. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Before I throw it back to Robin and Marty Lynn, I want to personally send a special thanks to our production team on the ground here, led by Karen Foster. Thank you, Karen. We would not be here without her able assistance in producing this in such a seamless manner. And now a few words from our chairs.
Thank you, Katie, and thank you, Andrea, Vada, Kathy, and Kelly, for a thought-provoking and engaging conversation. I know there were quite a few questions that the panel couldn't get to because of our time limitations, so I encourage you to bring them up in the breakout room session.
Before I let you go off to your breakout rooms, we would be remiss if we didn't acknowledge all of the people who helped us bring this program to you today. Our fantastic volunteers, Carrie Thomas, Jen Barth, Deb Landau, Noelle Brown, Annie Aston, Gloria Zabel, Shelley Greenslade, and Maria Cicchini. Our leadership committee, Alyssa Johnston and Carrie Perez from Wells Fargo, Amy Prosenjack, A to Z Wineworks, Xiaoyan Chin Dennis, Anna Ariando, and Kelly Burren, K&L Gates, Audrey Eifert, Oregon State University, Kara Snow, Technology Association of Oregon, and D'Angela Wells, Portland General Electric.
Eva Kripalani, Office of General Counsel Network, Luann Abrams, CEOX, Naomi Hazlett, Miller Nash, Kirsten Meneglello, Illumination Coaching, Alice Tang, BPG Wealth Management, Linda Williams, Washington Trust Bank, Cheryl Corbett and Devin Clancy, Tonkin Torp, Lori Dornan, the Greenbrier Companies, Jason Browser, Stoll Reeves, Sheila Murdy, Tillamook County Creamery Association, and Gail Baker, Cambia Health Solutions. I add my thanks to Robin for the time and additional resources you contributed to make this event happen. Now it's time for everyone to move to your breakout session. Remember to click on the link found in your Zoom calendar invitation for the breakout room, so you'll be redirected to your assigned session. If you have any difficulty finding your breakout room link, click on the Help Center link in the chat box at the bottom of your screen, and someone will help you.
This is the last time Marty and I will have an opportunity to interact with you. So we want to thank you from the bottom of our hearts again for joining us, and enjoy your breakout room sessions.